You found it. It's the real news with your host, David Knight.
Joining us now is Outlaw Morgan. And of course, I think, Outlaw, your biggest presence is on Facebook. I think you've got over 500,000 followers on Facebook. But I wanted to talk to him about gun control and what we see in the wake of the shooting a week and a day ago at the Texas church. We now have an article that's up on Infowars.com. The mainstream media is promoting gun confiscation orders as the solution, as they always do. Right, Outlaw?
Yeah, that's right. You know, but the funny thing is, let me just, before I get into this, I want to digress a minute, because you were actually talking about the whole, Christmas and abroad, where they're changing policies basically to appease others.
Yes.
And that is funny that you mentioned that, because last night I was sitting around a fire pit with some friends and we were talking about Christmas. Now, for the record, I'm not religious, but I grew up in a time where we actually said morning prayer and we actually did the Pledge of Allegiance. And it's always been Christmas. And in my mind, it always will be. And if that offends anyone, then I'm going to make sure that I offend everyone possible. And I'm going to raise.
Well, we have to understand that it's not just religion. You know, I mean, I look at this, and a lot of Christians who look at Christmas say, it's really become kind of synthesized with a lot of pagan stuff. I mean, we got Santa Claus. There's nothing at all about Santa Claus. I mean, you could loosely tie that back into a tradition of St. Nicholas. But what Santa Claus has become is really more of an expression of Coca-Cola than it is of Christianity. And so, you know, this is what we're seeing here is not one religion pushing back against another religion, but what we see here is a pushback against our culture, against our nationality. And Islam is not simply a religious movement. It is a religious and political movement. And you would think that the left of all people would see that and push back against it instead of celebrating it, wouldn't you?
Well, you know what? Let's just be very honest. I think what we've seen over the past, couple of years is that the left's actually become the weaker species of our country. Known that they have been for a long time. They always, bow down to anything other than our traditional values. And I think that that's what we're seeing in America right now, is that we're seeing that people actually want the traditional values back. I don't care about Santa. I'm a grown up. I understand this is a economical, strategical plan to boost numbers for the fiscal year. I'm well aware of that. But as a child, I grew up under a certain, guideline of values and morals. And I think that we need to start instilling that back into our kids. I'm not worried about what everybody else thinks. I'm not worried about what anybody from another country thinks. You're in America, and this is how we do it here. And the last thing that I would like to see is America become Paris, America become Denmark, or Sweden, or any other European country for that matter. And we have to bow down to this. So it's up to us as the American citizens to pull our pants up and, don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to speak up. There are people that are out there doing it. There's people out there that are listening. And that's kind of like why the Facebook page I have has grown so much. But back to the gun control.
Yeah, before we leave that, let's also say that I think what's really at play here in Paris is a cowardly move by the French government that believes that they don't want to or can't take the necessary measures to protect people in a public place if the Muslims don't want them to be there. And I think we have seen so many attacks in Paris that these guys just want to raise the white flag and run away. And that's what they're doing with this issue. Instead of saying, well, we're going to make sure that the people are protected in this area, or even to take the more reasonable approach and say, we're going to patrol our borders and we're going to know who comes into our country. Because like the story that I covered earlier, Outlaw, we're talking about what's going on in New York City here in America with MS-13 coming in. That's where my wife grew up. And they didn't used to have these problems. And you've got the people at this point in time who are being victimized by MS-13 are Hispanic immigrants who've come from El Salvador, from other places in Central America, from Mexico. And they're the ones who are bearing the brunt of this, because as we have open borders and they're trying to leave their country, they said, we thought we got away from all of this. Well, not if you got open borders. The bad guys can just follow you into this country and do the same thing here that they're doing there. And that's why we've got to have control of our borders. And that's why the French need to do that. But at the very least, if they're not going to do that, they could try to protect the people, but they don't want to do that either.
But, it's funny that we're having this conversation, because I literally had this conversation with people last night as well. And there was one girl who's, she's an immigrant here to this country legally. And we were talking, and she's a little bit more on the liberal side of where it comes to immigration, migration, border control, et cetera. And she's looking at Puerto Rico, and she's feeling, really hurtful for those people. And and then of course I switched it from Puerto Rico back to like the Middle East or whatever. And by the end of the conversation, I was like, look, my thing is, I actually have way more. I want to protect your security way more than I want to protect your feelings. You understand? And that's what liberals can't comprehend. And you're absolutely right. And I mean, let's be honest. That the leader of ISIS pretty much said that he's going to slip people in through the cracks as refugees. And let's be honest. Back when Hillary was trying to run for president, there really was no vetting process. That's something that's actually been found throughout the time where we saw how this works. There's really no way to vet people. So, I can't look at President Trump and say that he's out of control because he's actually trying to put security for the American citizens up front and to the forefront of what he's trying to do. I think that's awesome. I think people need to put their feelings to the side and actually think logical, which is actually what we struggle with as a nation, because there's a lot of people out there that's been raised. This past generation is a prime example. Look at Antifa. They are the shining example of a generation that's grown up through the liberation or the liberal process through indoctrination and subjugation within the schooling system. And I mean, if you can't see it, they're the shining example of what you get when you just like really let people run amok in my feelings. And it's like the same where you see white kids out here calling other people, white privilege and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, it's really out of control. But back to the gun control thing, I love it when this kind of thing happens. Not that I love the actual act that happened. That's terrible. It's horrific. I'm not trying to like belittle that in any way. But I think the American people are like speaking loud now in volume, saying that we're tired of suits and ties in Washington trying to.
That's right. That's right. We got to hang on. We got to go to a break, and we'll be right back with that. We're talking to Outlaw Morgan. You can find him on outlawmorgan.com. You can also follow him on Facebook at Outlaw Morgan. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Outlaw Morgan. You can find him on Facebook at Outlaw Morgan. You can also find him at outlawmorgan.com. We were just talking before the break about what is happening with the kids in school. And, Outlaw, I would say that, as we're looking at how they're teaching them this kind of self-loathing, suicidal thinking, snowflakes. It was just reported that in Baltimore, where they have Common Core, where they're teaching them to everything about the political correctness of the left. They have zero students who can do the math. I mean, this is what has happened to our schools. They've become nothing other than propaganda centers. And this is really the scary thing, because that has become the focus of the schools, and that's why they're increasingly centralizing education, because it is a politicization, it is a propagandizing of young children. This is something that goes back to the time of Plato, saying, I need to get the kids at the earliest possible age. We've heard every dictator throughout history echo that, and now we see the fruit of that in terms of where these snowflake millennials are. That's the real concern that I have when we look at this.
I mean, look at it this way. Look at how long BAM's been around. Look at how long Antifa's been around. Look at how many communist professors are teaching children within colleges right now. There's people that have grown up within these organizations and became teachers, professors, counselors, things of this nature. And they're basically, you're absolutely 100% right. At age 6, my daughter, I had to sign a piece of paper at the school that she attends to not have them talk to her about oral sex, anal sex, vaginal sex, introduction to transgender sex. And I was like, oh, I'm not opposed to you being whoever you want to be in America. Unlike you, the people on the liberal left, I choose to allow you to live your life as you see fit and leave you alone. However, the reason that I actually exist is because you can't return the same courtesy. You want to stand on your soapbox and preach to everybody else that you are holding this moral superior high ground and you're smarter than everyone else because you have a BA. Well, that's BS. You know what I mean? So, like,
that's right. Well, and also, Morgan, when you look at this, what they're telling people as we look at the Roy Moore thing, the left has gone absolutely furious about this with Roy Moore. And I'm not saying the one charge is not serious. It is a serious charge. It is a serious allegation. And yet these are the people who are using transgender persons, ginger persons, okay? They got like a gingerbread man. And then they're playing with the little kindergartners, telling them that they don't know what gender that they are, that their gender is fluid and so forth. That is a pedophile agenda. What they're telling you and telling these kids and telling society is that these kids can make that decision at that age, what gender they are, that they understand what these issues are and so forth. And that is a way of getting around the consent laws. And we've said this over and over again, yet are they talking about that at all? No. Instead, what they're talking about are these allegations that can't be proven. It's going to be a he said, she said situation. They're talking about that as if that is the most serious thing. But I think we need to stop what is happening in the kindergartens, pushing this transgender agenda to the children.
I absolutely agree. Look, I've done videos that got me banned from Facebook multiple times where I talk about Little Miss Hot Mess, you know, reading to the kids at the library in New York. And the fact that these kids are sitting there playing with fidget spinners and have no idea what's really going on. And then watching the reaction from the parents about, this is great. That guy's a hero. Woo. You know, like, don't you like it, Billy? And little Billy's like, well, yeah, I like it. But little Billy don't know any better. And if we're not careful, we're going to slip into a slope. I mean, you got Jerry Brown out in California right now trying to pass a law to make it where if you're not using the correct pronouns, you can go to jail. This sounds more like Canada to me, because Canada.
Yeah, and the retirement homes is what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you got somebody who's a transgender and in a retirement home and you don't use the right pronouns, they're going to penalize you, send you to jail, give you fines and that sort of thing. And that's where it begins, and then it goes from there.
Right. And let's be honest. I mean, these guys don't even know who they are, what they are. So their genders are changing every 24 hours. I mean, it goes with whatever they feel like it fits. And that's fine. You can live that life, but you don't have the right to project that onto other people. And you don't have the right to arrest people if they refuse to not pretend to get what you're pretending to be in this big make-believe world. I don't live on Fantasy Island. I live in the real world with the blue-collar, hardworking Americans. So, I mean, and if we're not careful, we're going to go down this slope where we become Canada, which now can actually take your child. Your child is property of the state. If the child's 4 years old and says, I don't know, I think I might want to be a girl, you know, like, and you don't support it, then they can actually take your child from you. And this is where we're slipping to in America if we're not careful. It's really
well, let's understand what's behind this. This is really Brave New World. And, you know, people have looked at these two novels, Brave New World and 1984, and they argue, well, are we more like 1984 or are we more like Brave New World? I would say we're both.
Yep.
And the deal is that they want to keep you gaslighted, confused, controlled, and just busy playing with your fidget spinners or whatever else you want to play with that they encourage you to play with. As long as they can take you out, keep you in this hedonistic pleasure island thing where you're not a threat to them, they're perfectly fine to do that. If, however, you question that, or if you question anything else that they do, you get the 1984 treatment, which is what we're seeing in the rest homes that Jerry Brown is talking about. This is when they hammer you as a parent or they hammer you as a political activist because you don't buy into whatever it is that they happen to be selling at the time. If you oppose them politically or you oppose this Pleasure Island, Brave New World stuff, then they come after you with 1984.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, but this is the beauty, though. Here's where we're at, right? Like, as citizens in America, the people that were scared 2 years ago to speak up and say anything aren't scared to speak up anymore. As a matter of fact, they're becoming extremely vocal and very loud, and they're basically engaging others to ignite the fire within themselves. That's the whole idea of like taking our country back. And I know that sounds very 1776, but it's not in that light. I don't think when people say it, they just want to be able to be who they are. I mean, let's be honest. Where is the fascism that Antifa's fighting? If we could just talk about that for a second. I don't know where it is. I've looked for it. Every time I go to Walmart, no one's beating the shit out of me. I don't know if I can say that here. I'm sorry about that, but no one's beating me up and telling me I don't have the right to think what I think as a human being. And these people are just ridiculous. So, but
well, you know, when we look at fascism, you know, there's a couple of different ways that you can define that. I define fascism as a professor coming out and rubbing out what these kids are putting on the sidewalk, you know, writing down something about abortion. And he says, well, that's your free speech. My free speech is to rub out your free speech. Right. That is fascism. That's where these people are really coming from. They don't know the definition of Marxism. They don't know the definition of socialism. They don't know it politically. They don't know it economically. There's an economic fascism. We call it crony capitalism, where basically you allow the veneer of private ownership. You allow a few big corporations to have private ownership. That was what Hitler did. Hitler called himself a socialist. Yeah. And that kind of economic fascism is just an intermediate step, he said, to full-on communism where they own everything. But they don't understand or care about that distinction. They simply oppose you, and they say they're anti-fascist because they want to use a fascist label on other people. It's just like they say racist, sexist, homophobe, fascist. It's just like a big FU label that they run off on everybody.
Well, look at how the mainstream media is painting these people to be like saints and like they're the knights of our time. Like what they're doing is honorable and is noble. You know, they're out there fighting Nazis. But the problem is you can actually watch so many videos of Antifa where if a dude's not wearing a mask and he's actually there in support of Antifa, they beat him up and he was there for them. You know what I mean? They don't know who they're fighting anymore. You know, like
Yeah.
they just know if you're not wearing a mask, you're a part of the problem and you're a Nazi and down with the white man, kill whitey, whatever. You know, but like I said, this goes back to the indoctrination, the subjugation. This is the end result of what you've program kids to believe that you're oppressed and everybody's a bunch of big meanies out here. I can tell you from living life as a younger guy, I once was a little liberal myself. Probably I didn't know it, you know, like, and I hate to say it publicly, but yes, I voted for Obama the first time, definitely not the second time. Grew up, got older, learned my lesson, got smarter, got wiser, started plugging into what was going on and realized what's happening. And I hope that this will happen for them, but I can't guarantee it will. I think we're watching.
We know what you're saying is essentially what we saw in North Carolina. North Carolina, the first time Obama ran, he won.
Yeah.
After that, after people saw what he was doing, they had the biggest turnaround from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party the state has ever seen. It completely reversed everything in North Carolina. All right, stay with us. We're going to be coming back right after the break. We're talking to Outlaw Morgan. Again, you can find him at outlawmorgan.com. You can also find him on Facebook. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Outlaw Morgan. We're going to get right back to Outlaw. I guess we'd call him Outlaw, first name. Okay, get right back to Outlaw Morgan in just a moment. Before we do, real quickly, I want to remind you of the sales we have at InfoWarsStore.com. Part of our 34-hour broadcast last week, we dropped prices on some of our most popular products by 50% and added free shipping. And here's some of those products. You can find the rest of these at InfoWarsStore.com, but here's some of them. Super Male and Super Female Vitality, 50% off with free shipping. Biome Defense, our probiotic formula, as well as all apparel, all T-shirts, all caps, 50% off with free shipping. Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. That's a great way to take your baseline vitamins and minerals without swallowing a lot of pills, as well as Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula. Same result that you get with B12 injections, but you can take it orally. Both of those, 50% off with free shipping. And you can find DNA Force back in stock now and discounted, 25% off with free shipping. All those specials will not last long. Those are deep discounts that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. We thank you for your support. Outlaw, when I look at the calls for gun control from the mainstream media, and then today we see this information about the Army lowering its standards to allow soldiers with a history of self-mutilation and bipolar disorder. I mean, this is, when we look at this church shooting, the people who dropped the ball here are the government, the U.S. government, specifically the Air Force. By not keeping this guy in jail after all the violence and after all the stuff with him escaping out of a mental institute and everything else, I mean, they're allowing these people in, and now they're telling us they can't meet their recruitment numbers. They got to have a certain head count. So, you know, forget the idea that we're looking for a few good men. I guess this is the insanity plea from the military because they can't meet their numbers. So it's like, you know, give us anybody. We'll take anyone. It doesn't matter what kind of mental problems that they have.
Right. Well, you know, let's go back to looking at psychotropic drugs. Let's go back to looking at like the kickbacks that the doctors get from putting kids on Ritalin and putting kids on different prescription pills out there. I mean, we're breeding a society of kids that basically we're breeding them into depression.
Yes.
You know, our world's changed so much. When I grew up, I would go outside and play until the street light came on, and then you probably had to come find me after that. And these kids these days, they're iPad kids, they're tablet kids, they're born into technology, they're born into these things, this artificial. They think the world is basically based off of likes and comments and how many people like their Instagram photos. So I mean, they're actually, you know, these kids are going up through a whole different thing from what I did, and I'm sure yourself did.
Yeah, they're living in a virtual world. Like you said, they don't get outside, they don't get sunlight, and I talked about this earlier. You know, we're talking about vitamin D supplementation. I mean, you don't get any sunlight. You get this mental depression, as well as a lot of physiological issues because you're not getting exercise, you're not getting sunlight, you're not getting these basic things. If you do go out and play, somebody calls Child Protective Services on you. Hey, we got some kids outside. They're playing. You know, call Protective Services and get these kids out of this family. I mean, that's the way people act anymore.
Right. So, well, not just that. On top of that, though, you know, the cultural Marxism basically creates you to be a self-victimized person, too. So Everybody's a victim nowadays, and it's really a competition to see who can out victimize who. Now, with this gentleman that shot up the church in Texas, you're absolutely right. He was dishonorably discharged. The firearm was an illegally obtained weapon. There was a lot of warning signs that no one took heed on. But then again, our federal government's gotten pretty lazy about a lot of things, just like immigration, just like, the various things you can look and see where they got lazy. And a lot of the problems actually stems from federal government as well. Funds in the schools and things of this nature, taking the family apart, etc. However, there was tons of warning signs, and they should have took action on him. Just like, I don't know if you're familiar with a guy on YouTube that calls himself King David. He's another red flag that's been found. I think he was arrested about 5-6 days ago, threatening to go on a killing spree. So there's people out there that actually want to be vocal about what they plan to do. And if you look hard enough, you'll find them.
Well, in the case of this guy who shot up the church, Devin Kelly, the people who knew him in high school said, yeah, he was a big problem in high school. His parents had him on mood-altering drugs to try to control this and everything, and yet they let him into the military. And what happens to people like that who already have psychological issues? Not only are they a danger to others, but when the military eases these standards, as we see, it makes it more dangerous for these people. It's not compassionate for anyone. One of the things that they're talking about in these articles, they said they put the ban on the waivers of mental illness issues in 2009 because they had an epidemic of suicides. They were being committed by these people who were allowed into the military, even though they had bipolar order, they were self-mutilating and these other issues, and they put them into a military environment. That makes them far more dangerous to themselves. They commit suicide, but too frequently they're on medication that causes a mass murder suicide. And that's what we're seeing from these people. So they're taking a situation right now. They say, well, you got to understand, as we got people that were trying to get into the military, only 30% of these people can actually meet the requirements to join the military. So what we'll do is we'll drop the requirements and we'll just let anybody in, even though it's going to end up in their destruction and perhaps the destruction of a lot of other people.
The funny thing is, I have this conversation all the time. I remember when our country used to actually take mental disorders and psychological disorders very serious. You would actually hear about it. We've gotten to a point now where America is literally embracing mental illness. And when I say mental illness, I'm not talking about special needs or et cetera. I'm talking about people that are basically off. They're one can short of a six-pack. There's something missing upstairs and they're running on almost empty. And we've been over backwards for this now and say that, and treat it as if they're special needs when they're not. They're just, my brother's a prime example. My brother's actually clinically proven to be a sociopath with psychopathic tendencies. And I feel no remorse or sympathy or empathy for my brother. He's in prison right now because he decided he wanted to be some type of, I'm not going to discuss that here now. That's a totally different story for another time. But society doesn't need to empathize with people that have mental illness. We need to find ways to either get them the help they need or do something to, in some cases, and I hate to say it out loud, but it's true, protect society from those people.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want the best for these people. And so we're talking about the fact that it create an epidemic of suicides when they eased the standards back in 2009. So you don't want to see those people harmed, but you also don't want to see dozens of other people killed as these people are going into this self-destructive meltdown. They have a duty to protect, and the government is always telling us, don't worry, you don't need these weapons. You don't need to protect yourself or have the ability to protect yourself. We're there for you. We'll take care of you. And they can't do that. I think that is the most, perhaps maybe the only silver lining on this cloud of this mass murder is that we see the reaction of Americans who say, hey, you know what, we're going to have to protect ourselves. The government can't be there for us. The government will not be there for us. The police were a non-factor in this issue. They were late to the party, and they couldn't get there in time. And we see this over and over again. And we have honest sheriffs telling us, you need to get firearms and train yourself because we can't be everywhere. We'll try to do what we can once we get there. We'll try to apprehend these people. We'll try to lock them up. But of course, as we saw with the Air Force, we've got a broken legal system. We've got a broken background system. Everything about that system is broken to keep these people away from the public. And there are physical limitations as to whether or not you can have the police be there to protect you. Even a small town like that took them 10 minutes to get to the town. And then by the time they got there, he was long gone. And the citizens who were stopping this were chasing him. And I think the key thing that we see, Morgan, as we've got outlets like USA Today trying to scare everybody about these military weapons and showing things like the chainsaw bayonet attached to the AR-15, that idiotic narrative that they're putting out there, trying to get people afraid of the weapons, and they will not tell people that the hero, Stephen Williford, was armed with the same weapon as the killer.
Right. Well, you know, in anything, you just keep repeating the same lie over and over and over and over, like Eric Holder, and people begin to believe it. You know what I mean? Like weapons of mass destruction, military grade weapons. The common citizen hears that and they're like, oh my God, like you shouldn't even have something the military has. But, and you know, that's a totally different debate too. But ultimately, the people that want gun control, I think if you're actually talking about confiscating weapons, you should not put our police departments, our sheriff's departments in jeopardy's way like that. You should go do it yourselves. Come out with your suits and ties on and go through neighborhoods and do sweeps if that's what you really want to do. And good luck to you, because I think the common American citizen's willing to pretty much die before they let go of their weapons and their rights. And you know, nothing looks more scarier than a chainsaw on the end of a AR-15. And I just want to say this too. I think it's important that, like, you know, a lot of times I look at the left and I look at what they're doing, and you know, I have my issues with it. And a lot of people do, but I want to encourage the left to please continue your path that you're on. Please continue to resist. You are the reason single-handedly why America silently went into those voting booths and voted Donald Trump in as our president of the United States. And regardless of whether it's the Russian narrative or whatever narrative you're trying to throw around, today and tomorrow and probably the day after that, he will still be your president. So I think it's important that you guys get out there and you keep doing what you're doing, because you're basically opening up a lot of eyes, even within the youth, the younger people, and the younger generation, where they're looking at you and they realize they don't have any relatability to you guys. So therefore, they're going to actually become conservatives thinking Americans. I don't want to even say conservative, because I
think you're right, Morgan. We're out of time. I wish I had more time. Outlaw Morgan, you can find him on Facebook. You can find him outlawmorgan.com. And of course, that chainsaw bayonet. The desperate attempt by mainstream media becomes the Onion. Fake news. Thanks.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. Whenever you want to have a debate with a fake liberal that always resort to violence,
we need to wake people up.
What the aging process is when the cell replicates, we lose a little bit of our telomeres. Telomeres are the little cups on the end of our chromosomes.
And when it runs out, you start dying. Secure your DNA force today at InfoWarsLife.com.